everybody, I'm Danny Otto. Welcome into another episode of That Recap Show. Now, before we get into the episode, just wanted to issue major spoiler alert. We are going to be going over everything that happened in episode 5 of the Moon Knight series. So if you haven't seen that yet, you may want to pause this video, head over to Disney Plus, watch that, and then come back and enjoy the breakdown. Now, with that out of the way, let's start the show.
Poppin' Off presents That Recap Show.
All right, joining with me to break down everything from episode 5 of the Moon Knight series, it's Jon Jon Rico.
How we doing?
Oh boy, I mean, my voice is wrecked for this week.
You sound great.
So I apologize in advance to everyone out there. It's going to be a little grating this week with my voice. Other than that, holy crap! Out of that episode, so much to talk about.
So good.
So much happened. I feel like I got hit by a dump truck. Like, that's all I can really say is just wow.
Yeah,
but
really.
Yeah, right? All right, I'm gonna kick us off just like I always do. You know, this reference is courtesy of Stephen Grant himself. We got a Ned Flanders Simpsons episode referring to Arthur while he is acting as a doctor in a psych ward. He looks like Ned Flanders, and it's perfect. Like, I would have never thought of that reference, and I was actually thinking of completely different references. But you know, I got to go with what one of the characters in the episode is actually giving us as a reference, and I thought it was perfect. Flanders is the perfect reference, and after he said it, I was like, you know what? He's better at this than me. That was the perfect reference. He totally looked like Ned Flanders. It was great. It was perfect. The only other thing that I can think of is I got a very small, and I totally understand if nobody else got this, very small Shaun of the Dead vibes when we had Steven grab the baseball bat while they were on the ship that was kind of floating through the afterlife, basically, or on the way to the afterlife, basically, and started kind of hitting the lost souls. Mm-hmm. And just when he mentioned cricket, it just gave me this very, very quick Shaun of the Dead vibe. But that was it. Other than that, reactions, like I said, of this episode, wow. And I cannot wait to get into more stuff. But before we do, Rico, what were some of your instant reactions from episode 5?
I think you said perfectly, dude. Wow. Wow. That was a really great episode that, hey, it put Mark and Steven really at the forefront, and we followed them the entire episode. We didn't really have anybody except for maybe Harrow, I guess, during some of the scenes, but this was a primarily Mark-based episode, which was pretty awesome from beginning to end. I really am loving the way this show is just like a complete character study as opposed to just like a straight up superhero action show that you could have just done that, have him be Moon Knight, go out at night and just kick people's asses all the time, and you could have easily done that, but no, you kind of chose to do a I would compare this sort of to if you ever watched Legion on FX, which this is pretty much the MCU version of Legion pretty much is, and I love that. Which is you're going on this trippy adventure through a superhero's mind, and you're learning so much about him, but you're also getting to see some pretty awesome power sequences and godlike sequences and stuff like that, and it just creates for this really cool. It's like putting ingredients together like a salad. And you mix the salad together, and you get this great little, a dish to serve up something that's going to lead up to our main course, which is the finale next week, which is. I love this show. I just love the show.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I love this. Let's talk about some tasty takeaways. How about that? We're going with the
Tasty
food
ways.
themes. We're going
Tasty.
with the food themes. So I'm gonna kick us off. There is no better way to kick off big takeaways than with the thing that has been stuck in my head for the past week.
Hippopotamus, hippopotamus, hippopotamus. Ow!
Hippopotamus. Hippopotamus. And that is Taweret. But every single time that she is on screen, I can't even listen to anything she's saying because all I can hear is the song that Oscar Isaac sang on the Late Show, on the Late Night Show with, yeah, it's absolutely incredible. I love that song. And I apologize to anybody who maybe already got it out of their head or maybe didn't see it yet and now is going to have it stuck in their head. And I mean, it's just perfect. I've watched that video like a bajillion times. It's incredible. But even Taweret as a character, I really like how they had her because they could have just had like this one little quick snippet or they could have had her just as an informational character, but they added a little bit of humor to her and they added a little bit of depth with her running through her notes and throwing them out and not being able to find the right one and just like saying like I'm rooting for you guys, like just little things here and there kind of added depth to this ridiculous character of a talking hippopotamus that I just thought, you know, we've been saying how much like we really enjoy everything about this show. And I just think like for me, that is a small detail that I appreciate it more because it's just a small character in like a quarter of an episode and a sliver of another episode. And in that, what they did was adding a little bit of depth, adding a little bit of humor. I am now like care about the character. Like I think it's a good character type of thing.
Yeah,
and
you're invested.
I just like that. And I like how it's like, you know, we may not ever see Taweret again or whatever. I mean, she may have a big part in the finale or something like that, but I am now invested in that character too, just from that little bit of humor and a little bit of depth that we got in such a short thing. But anyway, I go on forever. Rico, what's your first big takeaway?
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on a little bit on like Mark's upbringing. Basically, like we learn a lot about who he was as a child. You know, he had a little brother who kind of like, you know, looked up to him a little bit. They would go on little adventures together. And unfortunately, you know, one of those adventures kind of led to an unfortunate end to his brother's life. And another thing that played into that is how his mother looked at him when all that happened. And it's some pretty dark stuff, the way that, you know, she kind of throws blame on him. And it's a pretty horrible thing for a kid to go through. And it obviously plays into him actually developing this dissociative identity disorder. And so that's how the Steven character kind of is, you know, comes to be. He's made as this way to kind of protect Mark from all these little bad things in his life. So that Steve, you know, when we meet Steven, he thinks all these things in his life are, you know, are great. But, you know, we learned in this episode that Mark was just really protecting part of himself from that aspect of his life. And it's a really heartbreaking part of his story that I don't think that's ever actually part of the books at all. Because if I'm not mistaken, his brother actually becomes like a comic book character later on in the books. And it's a whole thing that I don't think they're going to get into it now with the MCU. I think they brought a whole different approach to Mark that made him not only sympathetic, but it's just a deeper character overall. But yeah, like I said, like Mark's whole upbringing is technically the origin of Steven. And we don't even get Steven, not only get Steven's origin in this episode, we also get a visual representation of Mark's origin in this episode finally too, which I thought was pretty great. I thought we were actually going to visually see Bushman, but we didn't get that. But we did get to see a moment with Mark on the statue. He was basically coming to terms with his own death, and he was going to end himself as a mercenary probably would. And I think that's when we learned that like Khonshu has decided to take advantage of him a little bit in this instance. And he goes, okay, I found this man that I can use at my statue. He's a broken man. Here we go. Here's my chance to kind of bring an avatar back into the world. And again, it just adds all these interesting layers to Mark as a character that he's always been this broken man who is just tried to get along. Like even he said, like his dissociative identity disorder kind of got him kicked out of the military because he went AWOL one time without even knowing it. And so that kind of led to him being a mercenary. So it's like it's this whole thing that's crippled him his whole life. And now a god's basically taking advantage of it and using it for his own purposes. So it just Mark is such an interesting character in the MCU alone. Not even just in the comics, but they've made him almost even more interesting in the MCU, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the theme that I was just talking about, like the depth
Mhm.
of small characters, and especially with Mark being the biggest character, arguably of the series,
Yeah,
and yeah, just the level of depth that they have in character development in general is awesome, and
yeah,
it really does get you attached to these characters, whether it's a small character or whether it's the main character. And I think that's great. And that kind of, I mean, that leads into to my other big takeaway, and it's just
My emotions! My emotions!
there were no ups and downs. It was all just dramatic.
Emotional damage!
We had death, both of his brother and then eventually of his mother.
yeah.
We had Mark coming to terms with his own almost coming to terms with his own death after almost being killed at the hands of his partner Bushman.
Mhm.
um we we had also a very interesting part where Steven actually has to come to terms with his mother's death, like finally admitting that he is not talking to his mother on the phone and doing all that, whether that was just like a representation. We still don't know what these flashes to Arthur in the insane asylum thing really are. I mean, but that whole scene where Steven then had to kind of come to like terms with, I'm not talking to my mother on the phone. My mother is actually dead. We had so many like just hard, painful feelings this entire episode. It was just
Yeah,
like, whew. And it goes back to exactly what I was saying. Like when we first started, it was just like, I feel like I get hit by a truck. Like after the
yeah.
episode, it's just like, damn,
And
man.
it
Like,
answers a lot of questions that we've been asking throughout the show too, which is also
absolutely.
makes them even more fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I cannot say that like enough. Like just how like emotional that this episode was, and I mean, I'm just like that's it. I mean, this is just like I think this is absolutely the heaviest episode of the series.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, that's the best way I can describe it is this is the heaviest episode of the series. I think.
Also, like Oscar Isaac is a phenomenal actor in general, but in this show, he is a force, dude. Like
Yeah.
the way he commands the screen in every single scene that he's in, and it like this episode in general, because especially because it's so focused on both Mark and Steven, like he really shines in this episode. And it's like I really hope he gets some kind of award recognition at some like in some regard. Like, because if
Yeah.
he doesn't, then I'll be pretty upset. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, no, I am totally right there with you. I think he's an incredible actor, and it really does show his talent in this many times. Not even just in this episode in particular. But there are many instances throughout the entire series where it
Oh yeah.
really does shine through how well he is really getting into these characters and really getting into someone dealing with a mental illness and this crazy life that's happening, not even just the mental illness but the crazy supernatural side of the life that's happening type of thing,
Yeah.
which there are average people in our real life that deal with this illness all the time, and they you know are dealing with this and not dealing with like this crazy other fake world that is the supernatural Marvel take of everything. So like just like having to kind of get into a character of this is a real life illness, and then there's this supernatural thing that is also happening type of thing. It's almost like having to build two levels of a character basically,
Right.
because you're not only becoming this character that is like dealing with everyday life and dealing with an illness, you are this character that's dealing with a real life illness and a supernatural like world, basically. So it's just it's so interesting. It's so crazy. And like I said, I could go on for forever. And maybe we will go longer than normal for the finale. Hopefully, we get a longer finale. But before I go on for forever, Rico, what's your last big takeaway?
All right. So I guess in our I guess the climactic scene of the episode, we know we're getting to the point where the scales are almost balanced, but they're not quite balanced yet to where Taweret can actually help them. And so here come the other unbalanced souls out of the sand, which of course are all the they're the people from the room in Mark's afterlife,
Right.
of all the people he killed, which I thought was a really cool tie-in too. Like, of course, it's Mark's past coming in to try and take him down into that underworld type of place. I forgot what they called it. But basically, Steven finds it. He finds his inner Mark. Basically, it's the point in the show where Mark and Steven basically just said that they are the same person. And so Steven channels his inner Mark to help save Mark, essentially. And
Right.
so he, like you said, he grabbed that baseball bat. He just started swinging, baby.
Swing away, Meryl. Meryl. Swing away.
But he swings away and he gets some of them. But unfortunately, he falls off the boat. And he gets up and he's trying to make his way over there. But we see he ultimately sacrificed himself for Mark's greater good. But it's okay because they came to terms with the fact that they are the same person. So if Mark's going to succeed, he had to do that, and he's still going to be there when Mark does get this done. This is also a really great nod to the Jeff Lemire comic run that I referenced last week, that this whole mental asylum arc is kind of based off of. And in that arc, he's making his way over to a pyramid, basically, that is the Overboy. But along the way, he's got friends with him who ultimately sacrifice themselves. So this is a direct correlation with that, basically, which I thought was really cool. Like, of course, along the way, Mark's going to have friends who sacrifice himself for his journey. But in this sense, that it's part of himself that's sacrificing himself for his journey, which I thought was a great way of taking that aspect of the comics and then, bringing it into the MCU. But and it all brings, Mark did it. He got himself to the afterlife. Like, that's what he needed to balance the scales and get us to the point where we're going to get now, which is going to be hopefully a phenomenal finale.
Yeah. So, want to move on to some predictions for that finale? I'm going to kick us off. I don't know where we're going to go. And that's pretty much where I'm going to start here. I have no idea what's going to happen.
So good.
Because, I mean, just like you said, the last shot of the episode is basically Mark in the afterlife. We've had, some promos, shots of scenes that, haven't happened yet.
Right.
So, I mean, without getting into a ton of that stuff, it's just like we know there's probably going to be some kind of showdown. But other than that, we really don't know what's going to lead up to that. Like, what's going to happen from that point to, the rest of the promotional footage that we've seen, which obviously at this point we know is going to be.
We have no context to it. Yeah.
Yeah. But
we do, but don't.
I did have one thought, and like I said, I really have no idea how we're gonna get from point A with Mark in that field in the afterlife to part B when we were getting the footage that we have yet to actually see yet. Mm-hmm. But I did have one thought, and it comes from other videos. Like, we watch plenty of videos like New Rockstar and
Emergency Awesome.
Yeah, Emergency Awesome. Plenty.
Shout out to those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to the countless TikTok creators that have a ton of videos and breakdowns and little snippets and stuff like that. Because, I mean, half the time, we have theories, but we don't even know 100% how to say our theories. And then that helps us, like, watching some of their videos helps us like kind of fully come up with our theories.
It gives us our own context to help form our own things as well, which is like what we need, of course.
Exactly. So this definitely comes from One of them, and I apologize, I really don't know who I'm referencing at this point because this is an older video, like not an older video, but like was like literally the beginning of like last week type of thing, or
Mhm.
the end of the week before, or something like that. Um, at one point when we see all of the statues of the gods that have been imprisoned,
Hmm.
where Khonshu gets put on the shelf, basically.
Yeah.
Uh, apparently, we also see a statue of Taweret.
So we see a hippo.
Yes, apparently we do. And like I said, I had not gone back and watched that footage and made sure, but this was made reference to that.
Mhm.
Meaning that like you said, she is working for Cyrus.
Yeah.
So maybe it's more of like a protection thing for her, so that like, she's in the afterlife, so she doesn't really need to be there. So maybe it's like a resting thing for her. But if she is actively in the afterlife, and I realize that's her job. She's kind of shuttling some lost souls to the afterlife, or to be judged, or whatever. So if she can be there, and still be in a statue, maybe this is how we get from point A to point B. Maybe Khonshu is somewhere in the afterlife. And what if Mark is able to find Khonshu, and then somehow they work together and are able to get back into like the living plane, basically. And that's the only thing I mean, totally reaching with that. I totally understand. And like I said, I'm just taking bits and pieces from other breakdown videos and stuff like that to even begin that theory. But I'm just saying, if it's possible for one, maybe that's how we're going to get from point A to point B, where Mark is back as Moon Knight in the land of the living, basically. The only other thing that I'm going to say, and I'm going to go with the prediction that I've been going the entire time, is that I still think there is a chance. And like I said, not putting all the eggs in this basket, not saying this is definitely going to happen, but if it's going to happen, it's going to happen next episode. I still think there is a possibility. I like the way you're looking at me, because you're just like, I can't wait to prove that you're wrong. I think there's still a possibility that we get an end credit scene of a couple of gods talking about someone that has the power to unalive gods. I'm not saying we're even going to get the name Gorr. I'm not saying we're going to see Gorr. I'm just saying we know that some of the gods know other planes of existences and know other planes of gods, basically. So I just think maybe news travels. And Gorr might be like
A god grapevine.
Yeah, Gorr might be unaliving gods on a different plane of existence and be more cosmic right now, but maybe some of them talk and they're just like, hey, watch out.
And they tell two friends, and they tell their friends, and so on, and so on, and so on.
Type of thing. Like, I just don't know. I'm just saying, I still think there's chance, and I still think it's going to happen. And I just think it's going to be a tease. I don't think we're going to get any sighting of Gorr. I don't think we're going to get even Gorr's name. I just think we're going to get that little tease reference that someone is unaliving gods. And that's it. I think that fade to black, and it's like, holy shit, that's Gorr type of thing. Like, I just think I could see that happening, and I could see that being a setup, but not like completely setting it up. And I think that would be perfect. But anyway, like I've continued to say this entire video, I could go on forever. Rico, what are your predictions for the finale?
So I do think we are building up to the inevitable showdown with Harrow, of course. I am curious to see when. Okay, so you brought up Khonshu possibly being in the afterlife. I think there's possibly going to be like a deal struck. They're gonna have to, like, kind of like renegotiate their deal, basically. Like, whatever deal started when Khonshu took over Mark at the first place, Mark's clearly not happy with what's going on with it, and they're gonna have to like come to terms with what they're doing in a different way, where Mark's gonna have more control over what he uses the powers for. So obviously that's gonna have to lead into him getting back into our, the normal world, the normal plane, whatever we call where we live.
Land of the living. Like that's
Land
all
of the
I-
living.
yeah.
There we go. That's a great way to say it. To get that inevitable showdown with Harrow. We did talk about that one promo shot again, them running across the little pyramids, which I just love that shot. So I'm just excited to see that. But I also want to see some cool like god stuff in the finale. You know, I want to see the gods not just in their silly human avatar forms, but I want to see them in their god forms. We've seen Khonshu, we've seen Taweret, and I think that's it so far. But I want to see more. Like I want to see the other animal representations of the gods. Like there clearly are these forms of them. Like show them to us, damn it. Uh, like I want to see that. Like you got to give me a cool god sequence in the finale to kind of balance out like the cool action fight that's going to happen between Moon Knight and Harrow. Like so cool. Whether it's them, you know, imprisoning Annette or something like that. Like I want to see some cool god stuff happening in the finale. Police. That's it.
Well, there's nothing else to say except I cannot wait for the finale. And that's what we think. Let us know in the comments below. What did you think of this episode? How are your emotions after this episode? And what do you think is going to happen in the finale? I cannot wait. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to hear about all of our video releases. Bye, everybody.